turn our attention to Chamber Chat, and the Executive Director of the Shelby County Chamber of Commerce is Courtney Chappella. Hello, Courtney.
Hi, Johnny. How are you this
morning? I'm doing fine. Well,
Not much. Yeah, it's going to take a while for your mountain of snow out here in front of the building to melt.
But I'm okay with that. When I first saw temperatures into the 50s, and it never ended up happening. This was days ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know where they came up with the forecast, but they were way off. There was rain in it, too. And it's not nearly that bad, but I remember back in, was it 07 or 08, when there was just ice everywhere, and then it rained.
Yeah.
And that's when this building flooded. It wasn't because of the river. That's a concern, but it was mainly because the water could go nowhere.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that again. So the slow melt is just fine.
Okay.
Who you got today?
Well, this morning I have Alyssa with Blue River Counseling with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Courtney.
Why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Alyssa Body. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor and a developmental psychologist. I moved here to Shelbyville in 2023. And while I've lived a lot of places, Florida used to be my home state. And so the snow and the cold weather has definitely been a bit of a shock since moving here.
Right. Your sweatshirt says unwell.
It does, which is ironic since I'm a mental health counselor, but unwell because of the brisk and cold weather.
There you go. So can you tell our listeners what inspired the founding of Blue River Counseling and Wellness?
Well, sure. So one of the reasons I went into counseling to begin with is because it was so life-changing for me. I went through a lot of different things as a kid and a teenager, which I'm sure lots of people do. My mother had a stroke when I was like 10 years old, so it was pretty significant. And then even in adulthood, things like struggling with infertility and having miscarriages. And along the way, I just had so many wonderful counselors that really helped me through those times and were such a support to me. And so that's why I got into counseling to begin with. And then moving into why open up Blue River Counseling and Wellness. Like I mentioned, moved here. Well, let's see, it's 2026 now. So right. I guess we're getting close to 3 years ago. And love Shelbyville. Has been so fun to get to know Shelby County in general. But I think anybody that's lived here would agree that a lot of the resources here are limited. There's just not as many medical doctors as we need, not as much counselors as we need, sometimes not as many restaurants as we need. And so when thinking about what to do and where my place was here, I just became really passionate about wanting not only access for people in Shelbyville to have counseling, but also access for them to have great counseling. I think sometimes when you're in more rural communities, not only is it frustrating to feel like you have to drive into Indy in order to get somewhere or someone, but sometimes there's this like stigma that you're getting backwoods people or the counselors that couldn't get a job somewhere else or things like that. And so not only providing mental health care, but having clinicians that are really just excellent and that would put any other counselor to shame and are here for the people in Shelbyville to give them great care.
Do you want to talk about your team a little bit?
I do. I absolutely love my team, so I'll always talk about them. Right now, we have 3 counselors on staff, and I will be hiring, so contact me later if you're interested as you're listening to this. One of our counselors is named Danielle Taylor. She's had about 15 years in the business. Ironically, she used to be a Department of Corrections officer before she made a career shift. So she is very direct, funny, has a lot of history of working with.
She is very funny. She's visited a couple times for us. Yes.
I forgot that you met her, but yes, a great personality. She does a lot of work with different people. She loves working with couples. That's definitely one of her passions. And both from her time in the Department of Corrections, as well as she comes from a military family, loves working with veterans, people that are in the active military, both the service members themselves and family members. And then the other thing that she is strangely an expert on is things like ADHD and being neurodivergent and stuff like that. So that's Danielle. And then we have a Shelbyville native, Katie Byers. And once again, only lived here for 3 years, but she seems pretty well known in the community.
Everybody knows Katie.
Yes, just because of how wonderful she is. And so she takes all of her years of experience in working in schools, and she works with our kiddos and some teenagers. And we have an awesome play therapy room that kiddos come to, and she is amazing with them. And then our, I don't want to say last, but our equally important third clinician, her name's Danae, and she really likes working with college students in particular, but adults that really want to be like, give me the coping skills, give me like some plan to follow, let's do homework in between. And so she works with a lot of different issues, but is very like strengths-based, growth-oriented, wanting to help people through life and transitions, and just really focused on some of those like practical aspects that sometimes people want from counseling.
Okay. Your mission talks about holistic well-being, authenticity, and growth. How do those values show up in your day-to-day work with clients?
Yeah, I think back in a day, and sometimes even in, the fact that counselors are like at medical clinics and things like that, oftentimes people think of mental health as a problem, as like a medical diagnosis where something is wrong about you and you need to go and you need to fix it. And, at least at Blue River and with the clinicians on our team, it's really like, you're a beautiful person. You have all these facets and aspects of your life. And it's not about fixing something that's wrong. It's about you saying, these are the things that I could grow in, or these are the things I want to grow in, and how do we go from there? And sometimes it's not just about changing our thoughts or even learning a practical skill in counseling. It's like, well, you really need to go to a doctor. So how do we help you get to a doctor? Because taking care of your body is equally important as taking care of your mind. And so when I think about that in the sense of being holistic and growth-oriented, it's really not pathologizing people and being like, this is an issue, and this is an issue, and this is an issue, but really being like, who is the whole person of who you are? And how do you want to grow? And how do we help get you there? And then the authenticity part is, I will have so many clients come in and say, well, I think you're going to judge me for saying this. And I'm like, I have heard every single thing under the sun. And oftentimes, even as we're in counseling, I want our clinicians to be authentic. I want us to be able to say, nope, struggled with that too, can totally understand where you're coming from. And so it's not about having a persona or this overly professional relationship. It's two people like today,
right,
meeting here as friends, as equals, as people that just want to grow.
And I think there was a meeting that, and I don't remember because we've had you guys talk a couple of times, but you talked about the stigma around going to someone in your own community.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. When you go to counseling school, they give you this whole spiel about dual relationships, and essentially that, a counseling relationship is a counseling relationship. You're not friends with your clients. You shouldn't be interacting with them outside of counseling, which is really great when you're in a very large city, right? And that becomes way more challenging when you're seeing people in the grocery store later after counseling. And I will say, by no means are our clinicians trying to be best friends with other people outside of counseling. But the reality is we all live in this together. As counselors, we are going to vigorously protect your confidentiality. There's no way that any information from counseling is ever going to make its way out socially. But that being said, when you think about things that are happening in your life, we're pretty aware, right? We live here too. And if we see you in the grocery store and you want to pretend we don't exist, we're going to protect your confidentiality and be like, oh, it's so nice to see you today, and as strangers. But if you're also going to come up to us as we're picking out our apples and they're like, hey, it's so good to see you. Or, hey, Alyssa, I want you to meet my husband in person. This is my counselor. We will be overjoyed, that, and honestly honored that you trust us enough to invite us into that space, to be like, we can talk outside the counseling room.
Can I ask the dumb question of the day?
There's no dumb questions, but go ahead, Johnny.
You haven't heard it yet, but I'll try my best. If you are a medical doctor, a pediatrician, for example, and you've treated your 48th flu patient of the day, which is happening about right now, you may have said virtually the same thing to every parent and kid. You're going to go home, you're going to take this, and you're going to drink fluids and you're going to rest. You may do the same thing over and over. How do you identify when you talk with folks who may come to you and they have the same labeled problems, gone through a divorce, something else has impacted them, a story that may be very similar to a person you've just talked to? How do you find the individualized piece of this to have that ongoing conversation?
No, that is a great question. Not stupid at all. I think, a lot of people don't know about counseling training, but counseling training, honestly, a huge part of it is how do we think about people and what they're going through? And how does that then influence how we think we help them? And then from there's all sorts of types of therapy and techniques and stuff that emerge from there. But really at the core, it's not about the techniques like antibiotics, for example. It is about this way of thinking about people and then meeting with people. And I think what's really hard to put into words, or this is how I view people, I think people are incredibly intelligent. I think people are incredibly resilient. I think all of us want to be our best selves. And it's not that hard to get on the internet and Google depression and have really credible articles from the CDC or a major hospital of these are the symptoms and these are the general things that you need to do. And so, like I said, people are smart, they're resilient. I would imagine most people go and then do those things to the best of their ability. Or how to have a great relationship. What are the things that make a marriage great? And you have so much access to that. And so when people come to counseling, almost always, they're not coming to counseling because they don't know what the thing is that they want to work on and that they don't have some sort of answers. A lot of times what we're working on in counseling is, okay, so why can't you do the thing that you know you want to do? Or there are certain things about your life and your situation that are way more nuanced than a single article, on the internet is going to cover, right? You have these relationships, you have your job, you have a past history of all these things, and that is so unique from person to person. And so, if I meet with 5 clients, I can never see 42 clients in a day. But if I met...
I'm exaggerating.
I know, but sadly, that is what a lot of pediatricians have to do.
Especially right now.
Right? Yeah, but if I have 5 clinicians in a day with depression, I am not handing them a worksheet and being like, these are the specific things we're working on. The questions are, why is it not working? What other things are you bringing to the table that an article just can't encompass? What are all the layers, to this? And every single person is going to be so different. And so, like I said, the techniques or the type of therapy we might use can be similar across people, but it really is a conversation with a live human being with their own history showing up in their life that is very different from the next person.
Kind of leading off of that, can you describe the difference between individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy? How does that all play a role?
Yeah, well, kind of similar to what we just said, therapy is therapy. The way of thinking about people and growth and challenges and how to get people to grow is sort of the same. And so really the difference between individual, couples, and family therapy are the goals. I imagine an individual comes in and is like, these are the things that I want to work on. These are my personal goals. And so then everything about individual counseling is to help them get there. When a couple comes in, honestly, because they're coming in for couples counseling, they oftentimes disagree about what the goals are. But in general, both persons that are coming there, it's really the goal is to help the couple. And yes, we help individuals by helping a couple, but it's as your goals as a couple, where would you like to be? And it's kind of the same thing with family therapy. Everybody can have sort of individual goals inside of that, but it's as a family, where do you want to be? Where can we help support you in growth as a family? And so I hope that makes sense. So counseling, kind of the same, but what people's goals are plays a huge part of sort of what type of service a person might choose when they're coming to counseling.
And you also offer something called therapy intensives. Is that correct?
Is right.
What is that?
therapy intensives, a little bit self-explanatory, is very intense therapy. But what I mean by that is not everybody can commit to coming in weekly, not twice a week. I mean, I do have some clients, but I was thinking every 2 weeks or once a month. It's just prohibitive in terms of finances, in terms of timing, or sometimes somebody's done a lot of work with previous therapists and they're just like, I have a lot of skills, I have a lot of knowledge, this is the one thing I want to hit very hard. And so therapy intensives can look like something of like getting therapy for an entire half day, getting therapy for an entire whole day, maybe even doing something like 6 hours a day for 3 days. And that obviously is not a great fit for everyone either. But for people that are really like, this is the issue, I want to tackle it. In some ways, my go-getters, like I want to go hard and I want to be done. Therapy intensives are oftentimes a better fit than this sort of more organic, ongoing process. Right. Somebody comes in with that goal, and it's like, okay, we're going to spend 12
almost
hours
like a boot camp type thing.
It is. Now, hopefully, it doesn't feel like boot camp, and there's coffee and laughter and. One of my favorite things as a counselor is when people come in and tell me about relationships and people, I'd be like, can I see a picture? Or they'll come in and they'll be like, well, so-and-so is texting me. And I was like, please show me the text message. A little, and just that like organic way that you're having a conversation about things, right? And like, you're a person, I'm a person. It's not just talking about things with your doctor, like, here are my symptoms. It's like, no, I want to know what's going on.
Right.
So you might respond just like their buddy might respond if he or she was sitting there.
I think that's absolutely the goal. I mean, we want to make it clear that hopefully we have a little bit more experience than your best friend in terms of dealing with some of the challenges you might be having. But absolutely. I mean, one of the things that sometimes happens in a first session with me, when I feel compelled to curse, I will literally say, is it okay if I curse? And almost always they're like, yes. I was like, great, because that, then I don't have to censor myself, which it's okay if people don't. But that's the sort of thing I mean. I think in certain professional environments, that would be totally off limits, right? And that way of talking with people and being present with people just wouldn't be like that.
Do you also offer group therapy?
We do. This is like not ongoing. So a lot of times that is time limited. Group therapy can look like anything from support groups. So a support group around a particular issue or, things that people might be going through. Occasionally, group therapy can look very skills-based. Like for 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to work on these skills. And you don't have to come to individual counseling to work on it. We're going to meet with like a group of 8 people, and all of us are going to be doing the same thing together. So like I said, sometimes it goes more support group route, and sometimes it's more this group commitment to a specific type of goal that everybody wants to work on.
You mentioned earlier that Danielle could do things with like the neurodivergent type things. So can you provide assessments and things like that for those individuals?
Yes. Now, all of our clinicians can do a lot of things, like not only screening, but for our clinicians that have been in it for years, it's sort of like when we see things, we're like, I'm pretty sure that's going on. But that being said, oftentimes somebody like Danielle might say to a client, I think you might have ADHD and just haven't known it your entire life. Will you go see Alyssa? And one of my particular roles, my doctorate is in developmental psychology. And so I've done a lot of extra training in providing these types of assessments. And so whether it's ADHD, autism, occasionally we'll get requests from like a court to be like, is this person competent, to go, or, if somebody's maybe going to court for something like a substance abuse issue, like a DUI, they might ask me like, hey, can you assess where they are in this process? As that's going to inform our decision about how we handle things. So not all of our clinicians do that. They do it in the screeners, but yes, I provide assessments of that nature, and I love it, and it's kind of fun. And I think what people don't think about, like with that, when you're diagnosing something like ADHD and autism, there's just there's just so much there. And so I'm giving intelligence tests. If you're a kiddo, I'm doing some psychoeducational tests to make sure we don't have like a learning disorder or something going on. I'm talking to family members. I'm having family members sometimes do formal assessments to tell me about you and how they experience you. And so it really is a comprehensive process. It's a lot different than going into a primary care doctor saying, hey, I think I have ADHD because of bam, bam, bam. And I'm like, okay, let me code that in your file. And does that make sense? It's not only to get a diagnosis, it's to understand how you or your kiddo's brain is working and what it's awesome at and what it struggles with, and then how you can use that information, whether it's at school or figuring out why you're constantly losing your car keys, or, like how knowing what your brain's awesome at and knowing what it struggles with, how do we then do things in life to help you?
And do you offer like therapy services around that if you are able to help someone find out that they have ADHD?
Oh, for sure. I mean, what's a huge part of those types of assessments is, typically my assessment paperwork is, I say pretty long because I told Courtney, not only do I tend to be long-winded, I tend to be thorough, but there'll be a page like, hey, here's what's going on with you, here's what you're great at, here's what you're struggling with, send this off to your doctor or whatever. And then there's actual test results. I want people to really, it's not a secret, these are what happened. And then at the end of that, I always give a very long list of recommendations, like, hey, you might need to go to your doctor, and here are the medicines. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell if these would be good for you, but these are some of the things that you might want to consider. Hey, you might need to get your kiddo in occupational therapy. Once again, I'm not an occupational therapist, so I can't say that's perfect, but based on XYZ, this, I think you should consider this. And definitely a part of that can be therapy, right? Like, okay, now you know you have ADHD. That might take a while to process, like what that even means. And then, the figuring out where you go with that in life. And when they're like, well, I don't have a therapist, or I have a therapist, but I don't really think they understand this. I'm like, you know who you should go see? Danielle. And that is really the fun part of working in a team, is that we can really work as a team to help people versus just this one individual counseling, approach. We can really all support each other.
Absolutely. So for those who might be curious about getting started, like, what's the first step look like? Do they have to be referred to you? Can they just call you? Like, that sort of thing?
Well, the great thing is that insurance has changed a lot. There are obviously some insurance plans that require a referral, but most of the time they don't. And so the main way that people come to us is they just call our main line, or I'm pretty free about giving out my personal email, which should maybe be a problem at some points, but going back to that personal thing, they'll just reach out that way, or they'll go to our website. We have a contact form that they just fill out, and we're reaching back out to them to say, hey, what's going on? And in addition, we've had some partnerships with the Shelbyville County Schools and some of the medical providers here. And so they have things like a QR code they can just scan and put in your information. So we'll follow up with you, or they can go to our website. You could, I was going to say, as a Chamber of Commerce member, if you came across someone, you could hit that and it could be like, hey, I think this person either needs counseling or hopefully wants it.
Right.
And can you contact them to get them more information? When that happens, because a lot of people are concerned about cost, understandably, we take down all of your insurance information, and to the best of our knowledge, I always cross my fingers because insurance is so tricky. We try to find out exactly if you need a referral, if there would be any limits to how many sessions you could have, which thankfully isn't a problem as much anymore. What's the copay you're going to pay? What's the how much might you have to pay until you hit that deductible? Right. So that is hopefully as transparent up front at the beginning, so that when you're deciding to do counseling, it's calling and getting something set up, but it's us figuring out together what resources you have to do that. And of course, working with you to find an affordable way to do that. There's plenty of times I've said to a client, I really think that you should come into weekly therapy, and they're like, I can't do that financially. I'm like, okay, so every 2 weeks, once a month, how do we change therapy to meet your financial goals, right, as well as the goals that you have, even if it's not ideal, or in my professional opinion, what will help work the fastest.
Right, absolutely. So why is having local mental health resources like Blue River so important to our community?
I don't have the most recent statistics on this related to Shelby County, but I think anybody that's lived here, knows that while members here of the community have very similar mental health concerns to maybe someone in, I don't know, Zionsville or Avon or whatever, that particularly in Shelby County, there are some things that are worse here than in other places. Our suicide rate is pretty atrocious. Drug use and substance use, it's a problem everywhere. I would never say that it's not, but seeing our things related to drunk driving, car accidents, overdoses, some serious health and safety things that happen as a result of having a challenge with either chemical or process addiction is a really big deal. And so in the sense of like, why Shelbyville, I want it to be easy for people to drive 5 minutes down the road, because once again, driving to Indy is a process. But I also think like being aware of the different things happening in our community is so important, and once again helps us tailor therapy, because we know, hey, in this community, these are the things we struggle with. The other thing is, as a business, I am not the one for competition. I really operate from an abundance model. There are so many people that need help. We're all with the same goal. And so what I love about working in a smaller community like Shelbyville is if somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I need this, this, and this, and me or some of the other clinicians aren't specialized in that, I'm going to call Bonnie over at Renovate Counseling, and I'm going to be like, hey, I have this person. You have this perfect counselor. Can we send them to you? Or things like when I have clients maybe experiencing food insecurity or things like that, I want to call people at SAS, and with permission, of course, confidentiality, release forms, all that things. But I don't just want to generally say like, hey, you should look for a place that could help you with food or rent. I want to be able to say, please go down the street, talk to these people, or here's the application right here in the office. And in addition, once again, with release forms, having these community relationships, I'll say, I know the executive director of this, or I know this person. Do you mind if I reach out directly? And thinking back to medical offices, they'll say, well, we'll put in a referral, and you will just never know when they're going to call you, if they're going to call you, like have to. And so that sort of like warm handoff, like, yeah, I want you to get this help and this resource, and then I'm going to call the person, and I'm going to make sure, to the best of my ability, they're going to get back to you like by the end of the week. And like we just have those relationships where all of these businesses and human services and medical things are just all working together for the people of Shelbyville.
I don't want to oversimplify it, but if someone is experiencing a mental crisis of some sort, but within that, you've talked with them and they realize they're living paycheck to paycheck, so rent's a definite concern. If you can take some of those individual pieces off, maybe it does make it easier to be treated for whatever the overlying issue is.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things about counseling. Once again, people are smart and resilient, but how much can you work on your marriage relationship if you guys can't pay your house bill, your child is struggling with their grades because they might have undiagnosed dyslexia, right? All of those things affect a couple relationship. Kind of a similar example. This hasn't happened in Shelbyville, but a previous place I worked a lot with caregivers and individuals with neurocognitive disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia. And what can be really scary about that is when somebody is having a delusion or doing some unsafe behaviors because of their dementia, it can really put them at risk, particularly of interacting with like ER staff, but first responders who don't know what's going on. And so I had this one client that her husband had a very serious form of something called Lewy body dementia, which has a lot of delusions. And when he would get delusional, he would get their gun and go stand out on the front porch and talk to people. And he's not safe in that situation. In that particular situation, I don't think that he would have done anything. But can you imagine a police officer rolling up to that, having no knowledge about what's going on, and now that officer's in danger, that family's in danger? And so one of the things that we did is we met with the police chief and some of the officers in that district that would respond, and we're like, hey, here's what's going on. So any officer on duty is going to know that. Here's the de-escalation techniques we're working with the family. Here's our knowledge about this, of how an officer could de-escalate that. And then, of course, being like, well, officer, you're on the job every day, so this is what we would recommend. But, like, does that actually work? Would that keep you, And so that's what I mean by community partnership. It's harder in big cities, and so Shelbyville makes that easier. But as an organization, that's just so important to me that Blue River is doing things like that, and going back to holistic well-being.
When you hear the word counseling, you don't think of all of those things,
No,
not at all.
Yeah. No, most people are like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to sit in a couch, they're going to ask me about my childhood, and
with a box of Kleenexes.
That's right. I'm going to cry a lot, and maybe this will get better.
This kind of leads to our next question: is what's a common misconception about therapy?
That
you'd like to address?
So many things. Well, yes, that we're always going to talk about childhood. Now, realistically, does that come up a lot? Absolutely, because most people go to therapy because a lot of the challenges they're experiencing is from that. But if you came in and was like, this is the thing we're working on, and it's totally in the present, I've never actually laid anybody down on a couch. I don't think that's actually ever happened in my career. But we're not going to
lie. That's what we see in the movies.
I know, but we're not going to lie you down on a couch and just have you ask you all these random questions.
I can't do that anyway, because no matter how intriguing the conversation is, I fall asleep. So that's not going to help anything.
No, absolutely. And so I think that's definitely a common misconception. I do think back in a day, there was such... Counseling for a long time was just seen as this like weird adjunctive therapy that didn't really have any support or evidence. And obviously, as time has gone on, we have so much research and literature now about it works, and this is why it works, and all these things. But to that end, I think that a lot of people just think that you come in and talk about your problems, or there was an overemphasis on, the counselor is a professional. They're like a doctor. They're, we maybe don't smile, or, like you have to answer the questions that we ask and things like that. And I hope you're getting from at least me, and I speak for my team as much as I can. We are just people. And so there usually is a couch involved. People can choose to sit in a different type of chair, but it's like us sitting down. I'm going to be like, do you want some coffee? Do you need some water? Tell me about what's going on. What happened this week? Oh, that happened? Well, okay, how do you think that's affecting your depression? Right. It's just this organic thing that is happening and evolving.
Absolutely. What advice would you have for someone who knows that they need help but haven't taken that first step?
Wow. That is so hard. I think that especially since mental health stigma is out there, it is just so hard. When people call in, I think at least I currently answer the phones. Maybe one day we'll have an administrative assistant, but I currently answer the phones. I hope that what they're getting from our very first conversation is that I'm a person. I'm not judging you. I just want to help you. From this conversation and come alongside you. And I do think that personal element helps. So if there's a piece of advice, just call. And a lot of people today struggle with calling. So I do say just email, and our main line actually has text messaging services. Okay. So there's plenty of people that'll text, or maybe we start with a phone call, and I'll be like, hey, just checking in about insurance, and they'll, and so reaching out in a way that feels comfortable for you is really important. The other thing I think about is bring a friend. have a friend help you. It's not uncommon in AA, for example, when you have like the first meeting you go to, if you don't feel comfortable, you can reach out to the organization of AA and they'll send someone to you to come with you, maybe give you a ride, like to be your buddy. And so I think people have this idea you have to come in alone. No, bring your spouse or your partner. Bring a kid, bring your best friend to say, this is really hard. And I'll say, are you okay? Are you comfortable with them being in here? And when they're like, yes, that's what we do. And I don't ignore the best friend either. I feel like, well, best friend, you've known Courtney for a long time and she's saying all these things. What do you think? Right? It's that organic conversation. So whatever it takes to help get you to connect with a counselor, that's what we want to have happen.
Okay. And for our listeners who want to learn more or connect with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Like I said, we have our main line listed. Hopefully I say it right. 317-207-1830. You can call, you can text. You can personally email me. My name is Alyssa, ALYSSA, at bluerivercounseling.org. I think we have like an official line, like info@bluerivercounseling.org. But we're pretty easy to find, bluerivercounseling.org on a website. There's tons of resources there and a way to reach out, and that means as well.
All right. Thank you for being on air this morning.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really fun.